I saw them the second my daughter's face went pale. 6 older women had formed a circle around her in the middle of the farmer's market, their voices rising above the Saturday morning crowd. My youngest was pressed against a vegetable stand, clutching bags of birthday treats, tears streaming down her face. I pushed through the crowd, my oldest daughter right behind me. The words hit me before I reached them. Unchristian, selfish, abandoning family. They were throwing these accusations at my 15-year-old daughter like stones, their faces twisted with righteous fury. One woman I recognized from my ex-in-law's church actually had her finger pointed inches from my daughter's face. What the hell is going on here? I stepped between them and my daughter, feeling her grab the back of my shirt. "Mrs. Patterson," one of the women said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were just explaining to your daughter her Christian duty to her grandparents." "Get away from her." My voice came out low and dangerous. I turned to my oldest. "Take your sister. Pay for her stuff. Get to the car. Now." My eldest didn't argue. She grabbed her sister's hand and pulled her away. The bags of chocolate and sweets my youngest had picked out for her birthday scattered between us. "You can't just walk away from this conversation," another woman said, stepping closer. "Your poor mother-in-law is suffering, and you're teaching your daughters to be cruel." "My mother-in-law?" I laughed, the sound harsh. "My ex-mother-in-law. I don't owe her anything." "She's family," the first woman insisted. "Those girls should be spending time with their grandparents. And those poor baby boys who lost their mother, they need their sisters." My stomach dropped. Those boys. Of course this was about those boys. "You don't know anything about our situation," I said. We know enough," a third woman chimed in. "We know you're refusing to be a good Christian wife, refusing to obey your in-laws, refusing to let your daughters be proper young women. You're teaching them to be selfish and worldly." The word obey made something snap inside me. I'm not anyone's wife anymore. My ex-husband died, and I certainly don't have to obey his parents. "But they're elderly and alone," the woman pressed. "They've lost their son. They're about to lose their home. They have nothing, and you won't even let them see their granddaughters." "Lose their home?" They inherited my ex's entire life insurance policy and his personal savings. They're fine. The women exchanged glances. "That's not what Margaret told us." "Margaret, my ex-mother-in-law, of course. Margaret is lying to you," I said flatly. "A grieving mother wouldn't lie about something like this," one of them said. "She's devastated. She posted about everything in our church group. The whole congregation is praying for her." My mind was racing. What exactly had Margaret posted? What lies had she told? "What did she say?" I asked. "She said you're keeping the girls from them out of spite. That you're the reason they lost custody of the boys. That you're trying to erase their sons' memory." The woman's voice rose. "She said you're so cruel you won't even let them move in with you when they're facing homelessness." I actually laughed at that last part. Move in with me? She tried to take my daughters from me. We're going to court over custody. She wants to take my kids away, and you think I should let her move into my house? The women looked uncertain for the first time. "She didn't mention a custody battle," one admitted. "I'm sure there's a lot she didn't mention," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my daughter's birthday is ruined, thanks to you." I turned to leave, but one of them grabbed my arm. "You need to make this right. Margaret is suffering. The whole church sees it." I yanked my arm free. "Take your hands off me." A market security guard was approaching now, drawn by the raised voices. Other shoppers were staring. The confrontation had gotten too loud, too public. "Ladies, I'm going to have to ask all of you to leave," the guard said. "We're trying to help a family in crisis," one of the women protested. "By cornering a teenage girl and making her cry," the guard shot back. "Leave, all of you, now." I didn't wait to hear more. I walked quickly toward the parking lot, the women following several steps behind, still calling after me about Christian duty and forgiveness and family. I got to my car, where both my daughters were waiting in the back seat, holding each other. My youngest birthday bags were in the trunk, probably thrown in hastily. I locked the doors the second I got in and drove away, watching the group of women gather in my rearview mirror, their phones out, probably texting Margaret right now about the confrontation. The drive home was silent, except for my youngest's quiet crying. My oldest held her sister's hand, her jaw clenched in that way she had when she was trying not to break down herself. These girls had been through enough. They'd discovered their father's affair. They'd learned about 2 half-brothers they never knew existed. They'd lost their father in an accident. They'd been in therapy for months trying to process the trauma. And now, Margaret was weaponizing strangers against them. When we got home, I sent both girls to their rooms with instructions to call their therapist if they needed to talk. Then I sat down at my computer, staring at the screen, trying to decide what to do. I needed information. I needed to know exactly what Margaret had told her church community. I needed to see the lies with my own eyes. I had one friend from that church, David, who'd always been kind to me even after the divorce, even after everything came out. About my ex. I messaged him, my fingers shaking on the keyboard. He responded within 10 minutes. Yes, he'd seen the post. Yes, it was bad. Did I want him to send screenshots? I said yes. What came through made my blood boil. Margaret had written a novel-length sob story about how she and her husband were grieving, alone, penniless, about to be evicted from their home. She claimed my daughters had cut them off completely without cause. She said I was keeping the girls away out of spite and bitterness. She said we were the reason social services had placed the boys with other relatives instead of with them. But the most interesting thing was what she didn't say. She never once mentioned the affair. She never explained where these orphaned grandsons came from. She called the boy's mother a dear family friend who tragically passed. She made it sound like my ex had been some kind of guardian to orphan children, not that he'd been cheating on me for years and had 2 secret sons. The church community had rallied around her. Hundreds of comments, offered prayers, money, support. Several people volunteered to that poor woman's selfish daughters. 6 women from the market had clearly taken that job. David sent another message. The church has strict rules about infidelity. If they knew the truth, this would be very different. I stared at that message for a long time. The church Margaret attended was conservative in a lot of ways. I didn't agree with, but they had one ironclad rule I could respect. They took marriage vows seriously. Cheating was grounds for complete social ostracism. They'd excommunicated people for affairs. They'd refused to bury people who died while in extramarital relationships. Margaret had carefully constructed her story to hide the affair. She had to, because if her church friends knew her precious son had cheated on his wife for years, had secret children, had been living a double life, they wouldn't be sending her casseroles and money. They'd be ashamed of her family. She'd painted my daughters and me as the villains to hide her son's sins. I made a decision. I spent the next 2 hours gathering evidence. I pulled up the records from when my daughters first discovered the affair. The text messages they'd found on their father's phone. The emails. The photos of my ex with his affair partner and the boys. I found the birth certificates. That proved the timeline, showed that my ex had been cheating for years before his death. I found the court documents from the custody battle where Margaret and her husband had tried to claim my daughters, tried to argue I was an unfit mother, because I'd driven their son away with my coldness. I compiled everything into a clear, factual document. No emotion. Just dates, facts, evidence. Then I sent it to David with a simple message. Margaret is lying about why we're in conflict. This is the truth. Do with it what you think is right. I knew what he'd do. David was a good man, but he was also deeply committed to his church's values. He wouldn't let a lie stand, especially not one that protected an adulterer, while attacking innocent children. I closed my laptop and went to check on my daughters. They were together in my oldest's room, watching something on a tablet, trying to distract themselves. My youngest's eyes were still red. "I'm sorry, baby," I said. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." "Why do they hate us?" my youngest asked. "We didn't do anything wrong." "They don't hate you. They just don't know the truth." "Are you going to tell them?" my oldest asked. She was sharp, that one. She knew I'd been planning something. "I already did," I said. "The truth has a way of coming out eventually." The truth came out faster than I expected. By Sunday morning, David had sent me a message saying he'd shared the documents with the church leadership. By Sunday afternoon, I started getting apologetic messages from people I barely knew. By Monday morning, my ex-mother-in-law's Facebook post had been deleted, and she'd been banned from the church's social media groups. David called me Monday evening to explain what had happened. The church elders had confronted Margaret with the evidence. She'd tried to deny it at first, claimed I'd fabricated everything, but the documentation was too thorough, too official. Birth certificates don't lie. Court records don't lie. The timeline was clear. Her son had cheated. He'd had an affair for years. He'd had 2 children outside his marriage, and Margaret had known about it. She'd known before he died, and she'd helped him hide it. She'd met those boys while my ex was still alive, while he was still lying to me and our daughters. The church community that had rallied around her with such enthusiasm turned on her just as quickly. Comments that had offered support and money were deleted. People who'd volunteered to harass my daughters on her behalf were now sending me private apologies. The 6 women from the market each sent messages begging forgiveness, claiming they'd been misled, they'd never have confronted a child if they'd known the full story. I didn't respond to most of them. I was too angry. They'd made my daughter cry on her birthday because they'd believed a lie without question, because they'd been so eager to feel righteous and helpful that they hadn't stopped to think about the damage they might cause. But the real consequences fell on Margaret. David told me she'd been asked not to attend church services for a while, not a formal excommunication, but a strong suggestion that she stay away until she'd reflected on her deception and made proper amends. Her friends had stopped calling, her small group had politely disinvited her. The prayer chain that had been devoted to her needs had moved on to other causes. She was being shunned, and she was furious about it. She tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. She sent emails that I deleted without reading. Finally, she showed up at my house on Wednesday evening. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. My daughters were upstairs, and I told them to stay there no matter what they heard. "You destroyed my life," Margaret said without preamble. She looked terrible. Her hair was uncombed, her clothes wrinkled. "You turned my entire community against me." "I told them the truth," I said. "That's all." "You humiliated me. You made them think I was a liar." "You were lying," I said. "You told them you were penniless when you have your son's insurance money and savings. You told them we abandoned you when you're actively trying to take my daughters from me in court. Sent strangers to harass a 15-year-old girl on her birthday. Make you see reason," she snapped. "Those girls need their grandparents. Those boys need their sisters. We're family." "Your son cheated on me for years," I said, my voice rising. "He had an entire secret family. My daughters found out by reading his text messages. They saw photos of him with those boys, looking happier than he ever looked with them. Do you have any idea what that did to them? They're in therapy because of the trauma. And you want them to just accept those boys as brothers? You want them to pretend everything is fine? My son made mistakes, but your son betrayed his family, and you helped him hide it. You knew about the affair. You met those boys. You chose to protect him instead of being honest with me. Margaret's face twisted. You were never good enough for him. You were cold. You focused on your career instead of being truth she'd been hiding behind. All the Christian charity talk. She blamed me for her son's choices. Get off my property, I said quietly. Those girls are being poisoned by you, she continued. They're learning to be hard and unforgiving. They need proper guidance, proper values. That's why we're going to win custody. The judge will see that you're unfit, that you're teaching them to hate their family. You're delusional if you think any judge will take my daughters away because I told the truth about your son's affair. We'll see what the judge says about a mother who deliberately destroyed her children's relationship with their grandparents out of spite. The girls destroyed that relationship themselves. When they found out you knew about the affair and never told anyone, they feel betrayed by you, not because of anything I said, but because of what you did. You chose to protect your son's reputation over their emotional well-being. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. We're done here. Don't come back. Don't send your church friends after us. Don't contact my daughters. If you want to communicate about the custody case, do it through lawyers. I closed the door in her face and locked it. I stood there for a moment, shaking, listening to her footsteps retreat down the driveway. Then I heard my oldest daughter's voice. The stairs. Mom, are you okay? I turned to see both girls sitting on the stairs, halfway down. They'd heard everything. I thought I told you to stay upstairs, I said. We wanted to make sure you were safe, my youngest said. I sat down on the bottom step, and they came down to join me, one on each side. Did she really know about Dad's affair the whole time? My oldest asked quietly. Yes, I said. She knew. Then why did she act like we were the bad guys for not wanting to see her? Because it's easier for her to blame us than to accept that her son made terrible choices. And it's easier for her to be the victim than to take responsibility for helping him lie. We sat in silence for a moment. I'm glad you told the truth, my youngest said finally, even if it made her mad. Me too, my oldest agreed. She shouldn't get to lie about us and get away with it. No, I said, she shouldn't. The custody hearing happened 2 weeks later. Margaret and her husband arrived with their lawyer, still maintaining that my daughters needed their guidance, that I was keeping them isolated out of bitterness. But their lawyer seemed less confident than before. Word had apparently spread about the church situation, and it wasn't a good look. Our lawyer had prepared thoroughly. She had statements from the girls' therapist about the trauma caused by discovering the affair and the subsequent pressure from their grandparents. She had documentation of Margaret's social media lies and the harassment at the farmer's market. She had the messages from Margaret claiming we'd made her homeless and penniless when bank records proved otherwise. The judge was not impressed with my ex-in-laws. When Margaret tried to claim she'd only been seeking prayer support from her church community, the judge asked pointedly why she'd needed to lie to get that support. When she couldn't answer, the judge moved on. The ruling came quickly. Margaret and her husband were denied custody. Moreover, the judge granted a restraining order preventing them from coming within 500 feet of my daughters or our home without explicit permission. Any future contact would have to be initiated by the girls themselves when and if they chose to do so. Margaret started crying in the courtroom, her husband trying to comfort her. I felt nothing. No victory, no sympathy, just relief that it was over. Outside the courthouse, my daughters hugged me tightly. Is it really done? My youngest asked. It's really done, I said. They can't force you to see them anymore. They can't show up at the house. They can't send people after you. If you want a relationship with them someday, that's your choice. But it's your choice, not theirs, not mine, yours. My oldest nodded, tears streaming down her face. I don't think I'll ever want to see them again, not after everything. That's okay too, I said. Whatever you need to heal, that's what matters. We went out for dinner that night to celebrate. Not the outcome of the case, really, but the end of the uncertainty, the end of looking over our shoulders, the end of waiting for the next ambush from well-meaning church ladies or guilt-tripping phone calls. David messaged me a few days later to let me know Margaret and her husband had officially left the church. They couldn't handle the shame, he said. They'd found a new congregation across town where nobody knew their story. He felt bad about how it had all turned out, but he stood by his decision to share the truth. I told him I appreciated his honesty, that he'd done the right thing. Lies have consequences, and Margaret had learned that the hard way. Life slowly returned to normal after that. My daughters continued therapy, working through their complicated feelings about their father, the affair, the half-brothers they'd never know. My youngest's actual birthday party happened the following month, with friends and cake and laughter. My oldest started looking at colleges, planning for a future beyond the drama. I still see Margaret occasionally, from a distance. She shops at the same grocery store sometimes. She looks older now, more bent. I don't know if it's the weight of the shame or just time passing. We don't acknowledge each other. We're strangers who happen to share a painful history. The restraining order remains in place. My daughters never asked to see their grandparents again. The custody of the two boys stayed with the distant relatives who took them in. Our lives moved forward, separate from the wreckage of my ex-husband's choices. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, exposing Margaret's lies to her church community. It was brutal. It was public. It destroyed her social circle and her reputation. But then I remember my youngest daughter's face at the farmer's market, surrounded by strangers attacking her character, and I know I'd do it again. The truth isn't always kind, but it's necessary, and my daughters deserve to have their truth told, not buried under Margaret's carefully constructed lies. They're healing now, slowly but surely, and that's what matters most. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have exposed the truth the same way?